All right, so thank you for joining. I thought it was quite pertinent. Thanks, Dr. Abbey, NTG. Yeah, I thought it was quite pertinent that we've got this looming deadline here in Queensland, and I know there's a lot of people doing a lot of work in this space around the critical control uh, amendments that came through the Resource Legislation Amendment Bill. And I ran this a while ago, and I thought, well, if there's anything I can do to add value, potentially as a cross-reference to see where you are versus where you need to be, or for some who are outside of Queensland, a bit of general knowledge, then there's a twofold objective here on this one. So a few of you, you've been in my webinars before, or let's call it workshops. If you can, I'm just remove any distractions. I'm going to go really quick. You've seen my workshops before. I want to cover off a lot of content and just give yourself the best chance to be able to soak it all in as quick as you can. All right. So obviously there's a reason why there's this focus on critical controls, and even there's a focus coming through from a regulatory perspective and enshrining it in legislation. So maybe a few of us have been here. Uh, who wants to just throw something in the chat? What have you seen? What's this all about? Are we doing this because we just want to get some compliance? Or is there something here that we really want to hope doesn't happen? So give ourselves sort of 15 seconds, and welcome to those who've just joined us as well. That we just got cracking. But who wants to throw something in the chat? What's this all about?
I'm happy to speak rather than type,
Go for it,
Christian.
mate.
Ben here. Yeah, it's been really important for me. I'm with Heidelberg Materials, and we've started all of our sessions on critical risk management, reinforcing the reason why we have gone down this path and why it's important to us, and both morally and legally. That's because the impact is so great. So, sure, there's some legislative requirements now, but the reason why we're focused on it is because we're talking about things that could not only take the life of one of our own workers or members of the public or contractors, but severely impact, negatively impact all those around them. So, yeah, that's certainly the reason for it
Thanks, mate.
and why we have
Yeah.
that impact.
Excellent, thank you. And how I think about this too is hopefully this legislation isn't the first touch point people have had in this space. That this is probably hopefully formalizing what's already there, or helping us refine and do this better. Now I admit too um, that there's some risk here to it becoming compliance-based activity. Thanks, Craig. Ensuring critical controls working on the risk assessment effective in controlling. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, mate. Okay, so let's talk about critical control management legislation. So yeah, we've got some problems. We know there's some challenges. The work I do, there's a variety of levels of implementation, levels of effectiveness within implementation, and so I'm going to cover off all of the legislative requirements step by step with some examples of practical how that practically could be achieved. So a bit of the what and the how. Okay, and yeah, a lot of you know me, so those that don't, almost 25 years now, which is a bit frightening to say. And in mining, well, not just mining now, in high hazard industry safety, and I've done a lot of work in this space around single fatality risk, multi-fatality risk. So yes, I'm still working on the arm which falls out when I'm having a pause, which is why the push-ups are there. I'm a daughter 5 push-ups for every arm, so bear with me on that. I'll use critical control management CCM instead of critical control management. I'm going to move fast, and there's going to be at each phase, I'm just going to ask for some insights into where you feel your business is at in relation to these requirements. So there will be some Q&A. And so what's going to cover off? I'm going to cover off all of the requirements. If we get time, a bit of Q&A, and then at the end, I'll talk about what you can do if you need more information at the end as well. But it's a lot in 60 minutes. I thought it was an hour and a half, but it looks like 60 minutes. And yeah, I'll talk about how you can get access to the recording and the deck after this. So first of all, now a lot of you people in Queensland probably know this. some who may be outside of Queensland maybe don't. I'll just keep this really, really brief. So we had the Brady review done in 2019, which is the um, second, in here. Then we had the Board of Inquiry from the Grosvenor incident. Um, and both of those had some insights into what could be done better within the industry. And that's what this slide looks to cover off. And from this amendment bill, and essentially what resulted from a pure, well, what were the different chunks inside of the amendment, or all of these aspects. And I'm only just talking about the critical control management. So this doesn't cover off everything, just keeping it, in this little vertical slice here. The timings, where did it happen? Where did the 1st of June come from? Well, essentially from when the legislation was passed. There were some time windows which unfolded from there. So I know some businesses now are looking pretty good from 1st of June, others maybe not. And hopefully this can help as well. So I'll now step through what are all the different bits and pieces. So there's a policy statement here. Why we want a clearer focus on critical controls. Well, that's the intent. Then what we could see is that in relation to the Coal Mining Act and regulations, there was a series of amendments, and which were almost identical to the quarrying safety and health amendments. And I've talked to a few people in the quarrying safety and health side of things, and I think where it can get challenging is for the smaller players, like say for those that, imagine the small little quarry with only, let's say, 5 people driving around. Um, what does it look like for them? How do they effectively do this? Probably easier when you're a large scale business. And there's certainly a way through this where you can right size it. And I know, Ben, you and I, we had a bit of a chat about that too. So it basically touched both coal mining and mining quarrying, and it's almost the same. So let's go now into the first aspect here, where we had some definitions. So the term, uh, your business, or we see critical risk management, uh, primary unwanted events, material risks, all of those sorts of things. What the amendment talked about was it used the terminology of material unwanted events, with a bit of a definition there. And so each part I'll talk about what it is and then how practically we might be able to achieve that. And so if you are in this jurisdiction and it actually impacts on you, then the suggestion, or my suggestion, is then we'd be looking to either ensure what the current term is matches the definition or the minimum requirements of the definition. For some businesses, let's say for a small quarry, they mightn't have a term at all. And then I would suggest we'll just use and accept the current one within the legislation. Then you'll know that that's there and you at least meet the minimum standard. And also, where do we have this definition, and making sure that's all updated. This is where we start to get the practical bit. So for those that are in this legislation jurisdiction, how are you guys going with this? This is pretty easy, but give yourself a rating out of 10 as, nailed it, all done. 1 is haven't even started. Give everyone sort of 10 seconds, just drop a number into the chat here, just so we can see. Again, there's no right or wrong, just helps us understand where people are at. Okay, Jake, thank you for going first, mate. A 9. Who else is there? Dan, 6. Okay. So 6 means there could be some opportunities. Cameron's a 1. Okay. All good. No judgment. Craig's a 6. Who else is there? Who's actively in there? Beck's a 6. Thanks. Ben's a 9. So, yep. Update. Thanks for that, Cameron. Talking about Swanland Town. Yeah, awesome. Rob's 7. Kim's 8. Scott's 8 as well. I'll keep an eye on that. Brian, 7 to 9. That's a good range at the top end, mate. Uh, awesome. Thank you for those. I'll keep an eye on chat. All right. So, um, so what it doesn't tell us about, it says, okay, it makes reference to a materiality threshold, but the legislation doesn't tell us what is the threshold. of which something becomes material or not. And and so there's some work that needs to be done on how to do this. And one way we can do this, and I know a few of you have seen this before. Um, yeah, absolutely. Cameron, decided by the operator. And in my mind, part of this then is, well, how do we determine the levels that are defined by the operator? And so it's almost like what we do normally in critical risk management anyway. It's, to me, the materiality threshold is the red line. So what we see here, general consequence table, different categories across the top, um, different levels across the left. And we can see here that, for example, this business said that um, anything that could result in a single fatality will be will breach its materiality threshold here, because we're just talking about health and safety, not going to talk about the other ones. And therefore, any potential incident will be classed as a material unwanted event that could result in single fatality. Now, similarly, a business might draw its red line at multi-fatality and have that same definition or same criterion, or it could be set at lost time injury. Again, the legislation's silent, up to the business to define. And from a pure critical risk perspective, we're not saying that the things below the red line are not important. We have other mechanisms to manage them. The things above the red line, whatever is set, will get some extra aspects. Threshold set in colon and PH&P is multi-fatality. That's it. So that's probably the default one. Potentially, some business might be taking it to single fatality, but thanks, Cameron. That's spot on, mate. Who defines, thanks, mate, threshold? So, okay, so first of all, need to define the threshold. Then, and Cameron's already sort of talked about that, it gets a little bit interesting here, as in from a regulatory perspective, who formally identifies the threshold. And we can see the different coal and metalliferous here, and it calls out it's the operator. Let's hold that one, Abby. Let's hold Dr. Abby, because it's a good question, mate. Let's loop that back to the end, because it is definitely a bit different. So what's required is the operator is to set it. Depending on the organization's architecture, will depend who or what the operator looks like. For example, let's look at a BMA, how they're set up for an operator may be different from a small quarry, as an example. So I can't really give too much advice on that. So how they communicate the threshold will be organization specific. However, what we can talk about, which is the next aspect, is, well, how does that threshold flow into your own business or flow into your own site? Because we can't, well, in my mind, yeah, the operator can set it, but how is that enshrined locally? And so from my perspective, how I consider this could be played out is, once it's defined, then it is put within our safety and health management system somewhere. So here is an example of what it could look, some wording of what it could look like, and this could live in our glossary of terms, or it might live in our risk procedure, or it might live in some other document there. All right, quick tollgate. Rating out of 10 for those that are in this jurisdiction. How do you guys perform? 10, got it nailed. It's been defined by the operator. It's been defined locally and absorbed locally. And it's clear I could go into the system and find the threshold. Okay, Roger's a 6. Thanks, Roger, for going first. How are we looking for some other businesses here in terms of this aspect? Beck's a 6. So 6 to me is, you guys have done some stuff. There might be a little bit of tweaking to be added. Who else have we got? Jacob's a 9. Whew, that's good, mate. Who else in the jurisdiction here? He went in before. Craig's a 3. All right, thanks, mate. Rob's an 8. Okay, I'll keep an eye on the chat. Thank you. All right, so what do people think here? Ben, 6. Okay, Scott's a 9. Awesome. Thank you. All right, so what do people think now in relation to this question? Yes or no? So have a bit of a think about what we just went through and what to throw something in the chat. And this isn't just applicable to people in Queensland. Beck's gone a yes. What do other people think? Roger's a yes. Cameron's they could be. Scott's a yes. Jacob's a yes. Yeah. Yes. Lisa. Yeah, Lisa and Ben, you guys have nailed it. Yep. So if we go backwards, this is a really good question. It's great that we have a chance to just talk about this. If I just go backwards, it's going to be up to the organisation to find. So what Cameron talked about is certainly in the if there's things that in the Queensland in the coal mining legislation, if there's principal hazards, things that could result in mild fatalities, that's almost like the default will be here. However, the organisation can choose to keep the default there. So only for mild fatalities will be classed as material unwanted events, or it could be single fatalities. So it's a different lens of thinking about this, and it's going to be up to the business to define. The legislation isn't going to say for single fatality must be classed as material unwanted event, which is a key takeaway. Okay, so once we've set our red line, then in my mind, what good looks like, well, how do we formally identify what are the incidents that can result in a consequence that is above our red line, equal to our threshold or above? And this is where I see the value of a broad brush risk assessment, which is the mechanism that we can look across our business to say, well, let's granulate down to what are the unwanted events that could result in this. So how are people going with broad brush risk assessments in their business to identify material unwanted events? And this isn't just particular to Queensland. This can be to anyone who's in high hazard industry. Quick round the grounds, out of 10. What does it look like for you and your business? That there's some type of risk-based mechanism or risk-based approach we use to identify. Roger's got a 7. All right, that's a good one, mate. Scott's an 8. Robert's a 7. All right, who else we got here? We've got a few people. Tarina, thanks. 7. Beck just completed first enterprise bureau sites have them. They probably had a 7. Awesome. Kim's an 8. Who else we got? We've got lots of people online. We've got Gavin and Nat. Thank you, Kim. Anyone else there? Okay, I'll keep moving. Got us time. All right, so we're going to talk to the definition of material unwanted event, now definition of critical controls. Again, we can see both aspects of legislation side by side. Very, very, very similar, if not identical. So similar to the definition for material unwanted event, we need to have a definition of critical control, and the same principles apply as previous. If you've already got one, does it match or meet the minimum standard? If you don't have one, maybe just consider taking the current definition and then making sure that's put in our system somewhere, you know, within our local business. I won't do around the grounds on this one because it's very similar to material unwanted events. Okay, so this is almost the same question. It comes back to the threshold again, doesn't it? So if we have single fatality consequence events, it depends if we set our red line at single fatality as if they'll have critical control. So the idea here, if we have a material unwanted event, we have a critical control, up to us to define what level of consequence a material unwanted event lives at. So it's quite likely there'll be some businesses that will have critical controls only for multiple fatality risks, not at single fatality. Again, there's no right or wrong. And what I do say to businesses that are just starting out on this journey, or for the smaller players, I encourage them to move their threshold up, their red line up, from a pure practical perspective. There's no point setting your red line lower if you do not have the resource base to be able to manage the work that results from that. Okay, so if it calls out critical controls, then we need a process for determining our critical controls. And there's a depending what you read, there's a few aspects here. In my mind, what good looks like. like any control, a control needs to come from some type of risk assessment. And if we're talking about critical controls, then a popular tool is is a bow tie, which is pictured here on the left. Again, the legislation doesn't mandate bow tie, but we certainly, we would want some type of justification as to why were these ones selected as opposed to these other ones. So if we have our risk analysis process, then again, what good looks like in my mind is we have some type of process we follow where we bring in each control through to come out, is it critical or not? So bow tie, I assume most people on the line have come across these before. I do different sessions on that. It's designed for taking one unwanted event or one material unwanted event and analyzing it for causes and consequences and preventative controls and mitigating controls. And when we go through that, it allows us to identify what might be a critical control from that. And this is something that I've put together just recently with the more recent release of the um, International Council of Mining and Metals framework for critical controls. For those of you who might have seen this before, there's some extra questions in here which I like. They're not mandatory, but around, okay, can it survive a human error? I think that's a really useful addition here. So each business, as part of going through the journey of determining its critical controls, ideally should follow that process. Now, what I would say again is think very carefully about numbers. Probably not on this call. I'm not going to talk about how many numbers. I would say less is more. And certainly now we're getting into a regulatory and legislative world. Um, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Think very, very carefully about that. And I know there's a few organizations that may be going to roll back a few things because they know they're just not successfully managing what they've got at the moment. Okay, so this is a 1 to 10 rating here. Maybe this can apply to everyone, not just those in Queensland. So if you have material unwanted events, do you have some type of bespoke risk assessment for each of those? And from that, which allows you to identify controls? And then do you have some type of selection process that helps you identify what the critical controls are? So let's jump in the chat now. Rating of uh, out of 10. Look at that, some strong nines there. Rob's a 9, Jake's a 9, 8's, sorry, Craig's an 8. That's good. Roger's an 8. Okay, that's good. Scott's a 10. It's probably the first 10 I've ever seen. That's good. Beck's an 8. Thank you. Roger's an 8. Dr. Abby's a 9. Awesome. Who else is in there? This isn't just applicable to Queensland. No one else is yet. Okay. I'm not sure how many people here are underground coal mining. Look, I don't think this is a bad thing, Ben. Yeah, cool. Thanks, mate. You're 7. So if you're in underground mining, NIEC 6, work in progress review the racks. Thank you. Then there is, and this kind of makes sense, doesn't it? If there is a high potential, there's a material unwanted event that maybe isn't being controlled as well, then there's this idea of withdrawing to a place of safety, away from the risk, and that makes sense. Yep. And what if you read this point C here, if we are defining critical controls within our safety management system and a critical control is seen as failing, then is that a trigger for the front line to withdraw to a place of safety? It's an interesting idea. And there's some things we can do in and around that, but certainly that's I've seen some people panic a little bit in that space. Maybe it's not bad that they're panicking because if these are, I know the regulator has a perspective, if this is a critical control to save lots of life and it's not working, then maybe it makes sense. I feel like there's some minutiae in terms of what is classed as a erosion of a critical control versus a failure of a critical control. And I'll leave it there. Leave it there. We can talk about that one later. Okay. So critical controls and the risk management framework. So what it's talking about now is, okay, well, if you have critical controls, you've identified them, they need to be integrated within your risk management processes and activities. So what could that look like? And now there's a bit wordy here. I'm not going to read all the words, but well, we know we need to have definitions. We need to talk about our processes within our risk management process. Well, how do we identify? How do we manage? What are critical controls? How do we identify them? How are they used? How are they monitored? So it's like the life cycle of those things, I'd suggest, in the risk management procedure. But then what comes with that, and again, hopefully it's not a surprise, well, we've got lots of other tools and techniques that support the risk management process. What or how do these principles of critical controls flow over into there? So, for example, do we have a stop point in our JSA template where it says, okay, are there any critical controls associated with this task? If yes, then there could be a hold point that we make sure the critical controls are in place and working, and there's some type of supervisor validation before the job commences, as an example. In the contractor world, what do we do there? How do critical controls live there? How do they flow across? How are they monitored? So there's some interesting thinking. I could talk offline around this, but that, in my mind, is some considerations when we're looking about implementing within our risk management process. All right, self-assessment. We're doing well on time. How are we looking here? Out of 1 to 10, how well are critical controls embedded and material unwanted events embedded in here? Not just in the management procedure level, but also in the tools and techniques that we use as well on those artifacts that I use. Roger's an 8, Robert's a 7, Dr. Abby's an 8. Okay, that's good. What do some other people think? And welcome to those who joined us just recently since we've been going. Scott's an 8 to 9, Beck's a 6. Okay, Jacob's an 8. Awesome. So we've talked about the risk management system, and then also talks about including critical controls within our safety management system as well, or safety and health management system as well. And how could we go about this as well? How could they be added? Ben, 5 or 6, all controls listed just need to be better enforced than they need. Thank you, mate. So if we think about now, where do critical controls live in the safety management system? We've talked about a few things. Well, it'll be in our risk management procedure. We've got some definitions, etc. Then we can describe these things. So this is all, tick box. If the regulator came in, okay, comply, tick. So you might pass it there. Then I think about from an effectiveness perspective as well. And I've done a little bit of work here with a few clients on this. So if we have, there's a one-to-one relationship. This is in my mind what good looks like. If we have one material unwanted event where you can see falling from height, then there'd be one bespoke risk assessment. If it's a bow tie or something else, and then there would be one bespoke document in the safety management system that describes that risk and how it's managed. It might be in the form of a management plan, an SOP, a PH&P, whatever it is. And so that could be, yes, this is how it can play out. Citrus should be given to legislated SOPs that overlap MUE documents. So this is where it, certainly in the coal legislation, it mandates specific SOP titles, but those SOP titles and scope don't necessarily cover the full material unwanted event. And so you can see here underground fire, and there's a specific SOP for action to be taken in the event of fire. So there's a bit of mapping that needs to happen. Okay, so that's about in the architecture at the top. And then the second part is, well, if we have critical controls and they need to be in the safety management system and they need to be specific to a risk, what is my mechanism for doing that? And I can see at least two ways. One, we take each management plan and write the critical controls inside of that. So, for example, if it was I had work at heights management plan, then there might be a section called critical controls, and here are my 3 critical controls for work at heights. So that's one mechanism. Or the other way could be through having a parallel or a reference register of material unwanted events and critical controls, and potentially their owners as well. So an example like I like to think about is same like we have a confined space register. We have a register for our confined spaces. Potentially we could have a critical control register or a material unwanted event register. So obviously there's some advantages with the second strategy is the register can change. We might add a critical control, remove a critical control, change an owner, etc. If we have it in a separate register, then we don't have to take the full management plan through the whole document review process early on, or sorry, each time. The downside is it's not directly written inside of the SHMS document. So pros and cons in each. There's at least two options. Um, yeah, either can be done. Maybe there could be a third option I don't know about. But how are people looking here? Let's do the round of grounds now. So the critical control being associated or written within the SHMS. Uh, Ben, do you agree it could appear in both? It could, mate. Um, my only thing I think about there is then there's what happens if one says something different to the other. That potentially is a risk I see with that. All right, rating out of 10. How are people going in this space? Roger's an 8. Okay, Roger, I think you'd be an 8 for like everything, which is pretty good. What else we got from other people? Jacob's a 7. All right, Dr. Abbey's a 7. Robert's an 8. Yes. What else we got? All right, everyone else is silent. All right, so we're doing pretty well on time, actually. Last time this took me a long time. So critical controls and officers of corporations. Beck, having the register with a system that reflects the document works well. We're O7 working towards getting the GRC up and running. Thanks, Beck. That's some good insights, mate. And I think as long as you can just show that link, again, because the legislation doesn't tell you how it needs to be done, just tells you the what. So I think that's a pretty defendable position. All right, then we've got this thing around officers of corporations. Um, they need to have an understanding of the critical controls and have information on performance as well as hazards and risks and do some responsing. Have some responses in there. So again, we points to our organizational architecture and then also what can we do to do that? So before I jump into maybe a way to do this, how have people done this? Who wants to throw something in the chat of how this has been addressed within their business? Anyone solve this one? How have we communicated with these officers? How are they aware of the performance of critical controls? Roger, due diligence. Okay. So I guess I assume that's almost like an assurance process or some type of due diligence process where now this is added into scope in that space. What else? What else have people done here? How have you solved this one, or how could we solve this one? M. Jensen, presentation MUEs plus screen results board, mate. The updates, critical performance, and actions to address. Thanks, mate. I assume that's Mark. What else? What else have people done? Awesome. You know what? Thanks, Mark. Anyone else done some space? They're not. We'll show you current results, critical reviews, and monthly reports. Awesome. So yeah, again, assuming by now most organisations have done this work, but maybe for those not in Queensland mining, um, who is an officer? And I had to go down a bit of a rabbit hole here to understand who that could be. And my interpretation fell out back. We use risk and audit committee meetings, safety committee meetings. Thanks, Beck. So my interpretation, if those that aren't in the site management structure, so don't report into an SSC, whose level of responsibility is such that if convicted, if they did not act on critical control, critical risk information, I don't like using the word convicted, but potentially have a role to play or can influence the performance or contribute to the influence of that. So who could that be? I don't know, could be anyone in group. If you have a corporate overhead, could be anyone there. So what do we need to do? Well, obviously get clear on who those are, and it sounds like a few people have, and how will we monitor and report on that, and then how will the information flow? So a few people have talked about monthly reporting. To me, that kind of makes sense. If we already have information on health and safety performance flowing up and down the organization and already reaching into offices, then to me it makes sense to add into that. Beck, ours is based off a charter. Thank you. Yeah, I would suggest not trying to just create up something new, try and piggyback off something that's already there. And it'd be interesting to know if these officers are aware of they have a requirement in relation to the ongoing effective management of critical controls. Might be an interesting question. Okay, so critical controls in principle has a management plan. So this is a coal mining centric requirement. For underground coal, you can see in the quarrying and safety, it doesn't mandate this. So principal hazard management plans and having critical controls within there. And in my mind, very similar to what we've already talked about for a safety health management system document. Do we have it written inside the principal hazard management plan, or do we have it as a parallel register or another point? Okay, I know I'm moving quick. I'm conscious of time. So this isn't necessarily now a this isn't in the legislation, but it points back to I think we just need to be careful on what we class as a failure of a critical control, because I have seen that language used, and I envisage that the regulator would be asking for information on failures of critical controls. And a question in my mind is, well, if the critical control isn't performing to the required level, let's say deviating off course, is this class as a failure? And I don't think there's some work we can do to help us get to a clearer picture on that. So I'd certainly, if you haven't done this level of thinking, the example I like to give is let's say for whatever reason we say, okay, um, I don't know, let's say fire suppression units on mobile equipment, and let's say we have one fire suppression unit on um, one of our, I don't know, underground haul trucks. It was out of date. So let's say that's deviated off course. Does that mean it's failed because it's out of date? And I think this is the work that we need to do to be able to, document the off course versus a failure. And so there are maybe a few different ways we could do this. I know, without getting right into the weeds, if the organisation has done work on critical control performance standards or defining criteria for how we want a critical control to perform, um, we can go in there and define sort of failure modes and response strategies, or erosion modes and response strategies. We can talk about performance triggers and what we need to do. Um, I think most businesses have a TARP, so trigger action response plan type protocol. Do critical controls have a TARP assigned to them? What green state looks like, what amber state looks like, and what red state looks like. So I'm not going to solve that one there. Beck, ours is based off a charter. Thanks, mate. I know someone did a love heart there. So I'm not going to solve that one here. Happy to talk offline. I feel like the key takeaway though is ensuring that um, I think the risk is everything's classed as a failure and potentially you end up in a space that's not helpful for you or the business. Okay, before I open the grounds up for some insight. So the legislation. So what we can see here, the really, really busy slide, this is an end-to-end critical risk management framework based on the International Council on Mining Metals. And if we were to do a full end-to-end program, it produces a number of artifacts as we go from step 1 all the way through to step 9. It's had a bit of a birthday, but the steps are essentially still the same. So if we think about what's been in the Resource Amendment Bill, it's just cherry-picked aspects of this greater process. So identify material unwanted events, having critical controls, ensuring they're implemented, and there should be something here about reporting upwards. What we can see though, to get to these aspects, if we follow a broad brush, we do a broad brush risk assessment to get to our material unwanted events. We do a bow tie and a selection process to get to our critical controls. Potentially do performance standards to understand the health and how we verify critical controls. So absolutely, we could do a compliance aspect and come up with a list of material unwanted events and critical controls. If we do that, we could maybe tick the box, but how effective is that? Because potentially we're missing the steps that we need to do to get to that output. So I'll get off my soapbox now. That's a big caution, and that's my concern with what's going to happen, but maybe that's unfounded. Who knows? Okay, so I'm going to give everyone now a minute, everyone on the line. Just throw in the chat what's been a key idea, a key takeaway from everything that we've been through so far. There's been a lot. I've gone really quick. Now give everyone a minute. Just throw in the chat. What's an idea, a takeaway, a tweak, a learning that that has come from this? Because hopefully it wasn't a waste of time you sitting here on the line. So got lots of people here. We've got Belinda, Brian, Cameron, Darren, Jean, Kevin, Martin, Nat. Just throw something in the chat. Tarina, Virginia, just throw something in the chat there now. There's no right or wrong. And I'm quite confident that anything you share, maybe something similar to someone else, or might be an insight that maybe someone else didn't think about, but could be pretty helpful.
Christian, a long one, so I won't write it. Our business
Go for it.
has multiple units, I suppose. This legislation isn't in place in the other components of the business, or isn't relevant. And we've therefore focused on rolling this out to the quarries business. That's the sticking point for updating all of the national documents, is that as we're rolling out through business units or through states, it's really hard then to be really definitive in a document that goes to all of them when those other
Yeah,
business units or other states haven't experienced that. So trying to find the tipping point where you're not confusing someone who's picking up a document and go, oh, this doesn't, I don't understand this because I haven't been through it. That's a tricky, and you've reinforced that when you were talking about have you gone through beyond at site level or at local level and made sure everyone's got access to that. We haven't, and that's tricky to implement.
I get it, mate. Once you solve that, you're the magic bullet, mate. Feel free to share with the world. Thank you. Who else? So we've got Robert. We have a lot of critical controls in place, but are they fully understood? Yeah, that's a great one, mate. And I feel like that really comes back to think very carefully how many critical controls you have um, with this evolution of legislation. Dean, be alive to the distinction between critical control failure versus erosion, necessity of CVTs. Yeah. And I think on that one, Dean, it's interesting, isn't it? So what happens if a critical control verification comes out as red? Again, is that class as a failure of a critical control? Or is it something else? So I think that language and getting clear on that is important here as well. Can remind that there is quite a spread of preparedness of 1st June 2026 when control come Henry, having go through this. Yeah, mate, it's like everything, mate. People leave it to last minute. Others don't. Mark, ensure we set standard for dealing with control response in terms of, yeah, mate, that's a great one. So Mark's referring again to that withdrawal to a place of safety, that aspect that I mentioned before for an underground coal mine. Um, in the absence of anything you define, then potentially someone else will interpret that. And yeah, I feel it's going to be very, very interesting there. And certainly the experience base of potentially the regulators in this will be interesting as well. I've tried to do my bit in that space, but wasn't that successful. Gavin, key takeaway, line of sight is clear. The alignment of awareness, understanding, and their role in reporting, monitoring, and improvement. Yeah, that's cool. Thanks, Gavin. Added a G, thanks. Dr. Abby Material Unwanted constant safety is above moderate for environment. Other parameters seem to be above minor. So that red line, thank you for that. That red line was just an example. It's not defined by me. And if we look at the language in the resource amendment, they're only talking about safety and health. They're not talking about the other consequence categories, so environmental community. And that's sort of where the greater critical risk management process comes in because that looks across everything or what you determine as the consequent types of interest. Thanks, mate. Beck, I think the refinement of RI training packages go a long way to support the understanding and help the newer risk owners. Yes, absolutely, Beck. Ryan, what Ben said, ensuring prep and execution, but excluding other non-revenue business units, ensuring SCs fully understand the gravity of the process. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Cameron, the organisation are obviously best prepared of those who already have CCM as part of the systems. Mate, you would think that. I would agree. Yes, and Beck, along with Beck, so I've done a lot of work with the tier ones who've had it, and potentially there's a lot of um, hidden, I think, issues because of the size and scale of what they've done. And maybe those issues are known, um, but we'll see. Shane, coming late seems to front end, but I'm pleased for getting officers involved and understanding has been difficult to be a focus point for me as they want the silver bullet you mentioned, not do the, yeah, that's it. Um, yes, once you solve that one, mate, please share that. Beck, absolutely, it's so complex, larger. Yes. Um, so Mark, well, okay, let's come back to that one. All right, thank you. I'll come back. That's some great questions. So let's jump in here. So, all right, so clearly we're here because we're interested in just a cross-reference or understanding what's happening. There is a considerable amount of work, but it's almost desktop work. Um, well, let me caveat that. What the re to comply with the amendment bill is a desktop work. To make it effective, there's more than desktop work as we know. And my fear and hopefully if you shortcut, yeah, you'll tick the box, but are we in any safer? I don't like using that term than before we made the change. And yeah, I'm really concerned about that. All right, so I told some people, what else can you do if you need some help or more info. So one of the things that we're offering is for those that, we've got a critical risk platform that can help you go from material unwanted event to the bow tie to the performance standards, all using AI, and it uses your own organization's information, and it will shortcut. I mean, it's changed my business model. What used to take us 30 hours now only takes like an hour, as an example. So if you haven't solved that one, um, yeah, if you haven't solved that one, absolutely, this is a trial. If you solve it, then don't worry about it. Um, it gives you all of the things with the ICMM ratings and what's critical control, and you can set your thresholds and everything like that. I like to say with a few button clicks. For me, it's about saving lives at work. So absolutely, if you're interested in that, I'll put the link back in the chat, or you could just contact me direct. I had it in the chat right at the front. And it's a pretty easy process too, because the guys are over here. I'm in Perth at the moment, and we're over here at a conference just sharing it over here. It's been uptake by a few people. I'm just going to put that in the chat there. So what it is, it's an application form. You get your login. It's a free trial, and what you can do then is just take, one material unwanted event. Sorry, that's the wrong link. It's the masterclass. You can take it all the way through. So there's a few people have used just a free trial and got a lot of value add out of that. So if that's something of interest, if your organization hasn't done that, it's a second link I just put in there. Saves you time, money, like everything. It's pretty amazing, and it's bespoke to your business as well. It'll pull out controls from your own documentation, plus also cross-reference from West of Industry. So yeah, I wish that had been around when I was a safety manager back in the day. So there's that. The second part too is, and this is, you might have seen this on my LinkedIn. It's probably the only one I'm doing this year. I used to do heaps, but I'm just flat chat. Is in Brisbane in June. I'm running our 2-day masterclass where we go through that whole framework. end to end, give all the tools and the template. So that's a little bit after the fact, but this also could be useful as a cross-reference or an enhancement for the current approach. And certainly um, we will cover off how this applies specific to your business and your context as well. So if there's people in Queensland mining, as there often is, then we cover off these aspects and make sure all of those little minutiae questions are covered. So there's a link in the chat for that as well. If you can make it, it's a really cool event and it's got a lot of good learning. So there's lots of reviews about that. Okay. So now we have time for questions. I've got a few minutes left. Thank you for those who joined. There's a link to those things. If everyone has a burning question, then feel free to unmute right now and ask. Otherwise, I'll go back to this question here or throw it in the chat. We've got probably 2 or 3 minutes for questions and then I'll wrap it up. So we've got a question here. Hang on, let me just go down. Thank you. No worries, Roger. Thank you. So how does it relate with the appetite statement? So let's go back. It's a really good question from Dr. Abbey and second from Beck. So I'm just going to do this off the cuff. It's probably need a little bit more time. Let's just go back to the definition. And I'll keep an eye on the chat here as well. Sorry if this looks going pretty cool. Okay. So an unwanted event in relation to potential or real consequence. So it's consequence only. It's not talking about likelihoods and exceeds a threshold defined by the operator. Let me just go down here. So how does this relate to appetite statement? Maybe I'll do my best to off the cuff, but I might need to do a bit more thinking. So first of all here, what we can see is this has nothing to do with likelihood or risk ranking. It's only consequence centric only. So that'll be the first thing. So if our existing risk appetite is based on a risk score, which includes likelihood and consequence, then this is separate to that. And we can see here, all real consequence. So even though we might have, isn't potential referring to likelihood? I don't think so. My interpretation. And also this mirrors ICMM as well, where it's about because we know controls fail. If you look at the Brady review, it talks time and time again about all the fatalities where controls have failed. So if I'm just stringing those together, the Brady review informed the resource legislation amendment, and then we have this thing around material unwanted events. So I assume it's not including controls. Does potential mean likelihood? No, potential to me is, well, if we had a high potential hazard, potentially it could have been the mine blew up. We have a real consequence and the mine blew up. Obviously, that never happens. I'll stay on the line and come back to that because I'm happy to keep riffing around. I think I need to keep going a little bit deeper on that to do that. So I'll stay on the line after this to talk about that. Did anyone else have a question in the chat? Sorry by that. All right, let me just do the wrap up and I'll keep coming back to the questions because there's also the other one about section 273. All right, so from here, so talk about links. Hopefully you can join us, do that free trial. I highly recommend. So for those that have registered for this and we have your email addresses, then we'll send out a link once. So this has been recorded in the slide packs. You can get access to this. I'll go up on our website as well, so you can grab that. Everyone knows where to find me. Probably getting sick of me. I'll cross LinkedIn. And that is it. So I'm glad we covered off all of that in less than 60 minutes. So for those that need to go, thank you for joining. Stay tuned for the recording and the links. For those that want to stay on the line, Beck, thanks. I enjoyed the session review. The slide on the whole process is my favorite. Yeah, it's getting busier, mate. I probably need to simplify it. Thanks, Beck. Tarina, thank you. Thanks, Cameron. Thanks, Sapna. Good to see you, mate. Thanks, Belinda. If someone's staying on the line, you've got a question, feel free to unmute and jump into it. No worries, Dean. Thanks for joining. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Shane. Thanks, Dr. Abby. Okay. So, who's still here? Is Mark still here? I think he asked about section 273. All right. So, Mark, for your benefit, when I went through to there, feel free, if anyone's still here, to jump on the chat. I'm just going to ask Mark's about the place of safety. So, I actually did some searching this morning and went to so this is in the regulation, place of safety. Um, so as it appears, now this is my interpretation. I haven't formally asked this. Section 273, where is it? Hang on. No, it's in the Act, sorry. When was I in? Just give me a second here. Feel free to jump something in the chat team while I'm just, that's regulation. I was in the Act. Here we go. Coal mine is dangerous. All persons must draw to a place of safety. Ah, yeah, it's a good point, mate. As I'm kind of bringing two worlds together because when I look in, sorry, so for those watching, you got the regulation, we got the Act. The Act in coal mining says the coal mine is dangerous, all persons must draw to a place of safety. And then if I look in the regulation, I look when place of safety is talked about. Was it in here? No, I'm gonna have to come back to that. I put two things together where I saw it was underground centric, talking about place of safety, and that's where I've sort of interpreted place of safety in a coal mining referring to underground. However, when I look in the Act there again, it doesn't necessarily mean that, yeah, that's it. If it's open cut and underground, which is interesting. I might need to do some more thinking on that. Thanks, mate. Leave that one with me, or feel free to put some insights. All right, for those that are still on the line, who have we got? We've got Belinda, Brian, Cameron, Craig, Dr. Abby, Scott, Virginia. Do any of you guys have a question or a comment? You can feel free just to unmute if there's something you want to share, add, ask, or if you're just slowly jumping off the line. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I thought I had that one solved. I'm going to come back to that. Well, we've got Cameron, Belinda. All right, anyone got a question, comment? Final chances? Silence is no. All right. Thank you, those that are there. I will say goodbye. Have a great day. And there you go. No worries, Cameron. Yeah, you saw me. More work to do on that one. Thanks, mate. All right. Thanks all. Bye bye.